Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I want to talk about a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and that is kind of the sources of suffering in the gear world. And by gear, I mean a lot of things, whether that's watches, whether that's knives, pens, any of those kinds of things that gearheads do. If you get into this hobby, there are ways that you can suffer from it, and I'd like to talk about some of those. And this is actually prompted by a great comment by a viewer on my Nkosi review, Chris Reeve Nkosi. Here's something I've yet to hear anybody talk about, Stuart Myers says, with Chris Reeve knives, and that's that they're not cheap, and there's no way to test one without buying one. Getting it in your hands and being able to say, yeah, I want it, you kind of have to take a leap of faith. I can't help but wonder if a lot of the positive reviews out there are a result of people justifying their purchases. And that's really, it's astute, and it's kind of a well-known thing. A lot of people are really keen to justify an expensive purchase they just made. And that's because there's the gap between your expectations and the reality, and that's the cause of all suffering in the world, really. But, so I wanted to talk a little bit about things that make people suffer in this hobby, whether they're doing reviews or whether you just like gear and you like trying a bunch of things. And maybe give you a few pieces of advice that might be helpful in reducing your own personal suffering. So let's jump into it. So first I'm going to just lay down a couple of truths I've learned in the process, then give a couple of tips. The first big one, though, is that your out-of-box reaction isn't always going to be reliable, so don't freak out too much. In my case, I've noticed that if I take a knife or a watch or a piece of gear out of the box and I just hate it, chances are I'm going to keep hating it. The Little Lion Spy from Spyderco is a good example of this. Took it out of the box and realized, I do not like this one bit. You know, the half the handle was G10, the washers with Teflon, so the action wasn't great. I just didn't like it, and it never grew on me, and so I reviewed it as such. Sometimes I'm more neutral about it. The Sage 2 from Spyderco is a great example of this. If you watch my review, it's not a bad knife, but it never grew on me, and so I was just neutral, and then I stayed neutral and kept going. But, usually if I'm neutral about something, it'll either grow on me a little bit, or I'll just realize I don't like it. But sometimes it stays that way. Sometimes I'm really confused. The Chris Reeve Thigh Lock is a good example of this, because I was really confused by this knife. I didn't understand its purpose. I didn't understand what it was for and what it was about until later on. And so until I understood it, I didn't really like it that much. But now that I do, I'm just in love. So that's an important thing. And then sometimes if you love something out of the box, you're going to keep on loving it. Like, for instance, the Greensmell Norseman. Took it out of the package and just really liked it a lot. And I've just liked it more over time. But the other thing to remember is that there is a honeymoon period. That's a real thing. This is the idea that right after you get something, for a little while, you're going to like it no matter what, or you're going to feel a lot better about it than you will in a few months. It's very easy to love a bit of gear for a while because it's new to you. It's like, wow, this is great. I've never seen anything, but then you start to see the flaws after a little while. I don't really care for honeymoon period. That's not a great comparison, but hey, whatever. And sometimes, though, the novelty outweighs the bad for a little while. The Sin 104 watch here is a really good example of this. I wore this for probably a month and a half before I ended up reviewing it. And, there's a lot of good here. But at first, my biggest thing is like, wow, look at that, the mechanical watch, it's awesome. But after a while, the flaws just got to me, and I realized, this isn't the watch I want on my wrist every day. So had I reviewed it and made my decision on that honeymoon period, it would have been a very different affair. And so you got to keep that in mind. The Chris Reeve Nkosi's another one. The very first night I got it, it was like, wow, this is really cool, and hold it in the hand, and I could totally use this. But then after carrying it a little while, I realized, wait a second, there's no good way to hold this damn thing, and it wore off. And sometimes you just don't detect some of the bad or the ugly until you use something for a little while. And this is always a concern I have in my loaner reviews. So if there's any question at all in my mind, like, okay, I don't know if this is going to be good or bad, I keep carrying it and I keep using it until I've sorted things out. I may still miss something down the road, who knows? I may have missed something already, but that's something I keep in mind. But anyways, that's a thing. The honeymoon period is definitely real, and you got to keep that in mind. You're not going to love something forever, or you're not going to know it the first day. So another issue is that it's really hard when you don't like something you buy. Because if you're like me, you spend a lot of time researching, watching reviews, trying to get all the information, so that by the time you finally are going to buy that flashlight, that backpack, that watch, that knife, you feel like you've got it down. And then you get it, and sometimes you're in love, and that's great, but sometimes you just realize, oh, I made a mistake. And that sucks, because it's easy to feel like an idiot, like, oh, I just spent $500 on this? And you beat yourself up for it. And that's no good. And sometimes it's easy to force love. And you'll see that sometimes. That's what the original quote was talking about. People trying to justify their purchase. Oh, yeah, it's a gem, 100%. I am just in love with the Z-Hunter. Oh, my God, do I love that Z-Hunter. I mean, the blade is black, and, oh, look at them. I mean, it's real easy to go down that path. And as a reviewer, it's really dangerous. That's something I try really hard to avoid. But it's still hard, because you feel a bit like an idiot. Like, did you really just buy that? Dumbass, I say to myself. But anyways, yeah, especially when it's expensive. One thing to keep in mind, too, is particularly if you're reviewing or deciding what stays and what goes, is that money clouds your opinions. As a reviewer, it's really nice when somebody sends me gear to review. This is a Boca Urban Trapper. My buddy Jim sent it along to me. It's great. And the nice thing about it is that I have no skin in this game. If I review it and I love it, that's great. If I review it and I don't love it, okay, I just send it back to Jim. At no point do I have to say something like, if I made a bad mistake, and buying something like, oh, Nick, you bought something that was bad. And that's hard to say. It's hard to do that. And so you got to keep that in mind. And there's also the price tag plays a role. Because, it's easy to talk about a $500 pocket knife, for instance, or $600 or $700 pocket knife, Shirogorov Hati here. It's easy to say, oh, yeah, it's a great thing. But when you're looking at $700 of your own money, you see what you could be doing with that instead. Like, oh, I could put that in savings. Or, oh, I could, go on a day trip with my fiance and have a really nice dinner. And you just wonder, is it really worth that price? And so you see the opportunity costs when you bought something when you might not otherwise. So that's something to keep in mind. Then finally, it's just the truth that sooner or later you will take a bath. For the non-English speakers, taking a bath, or people who don't have that, is, you just get ripped off, or you get screwed, or you just lose a bunch of money. Like, oh, how'd your deal go last week? Oh, we took a real bath. And sooner or later, you're gonna take a bath. It's just a simple fact. As a reviewer, oh my God, have I taken some baths. The Ngozi cost me a decent bit of money. I paid retail, bad idea. I didn't really care for it, and the gap between retail and sale price on the used market was $50. So I took a $50 bath on that, which was no good, didn't feel good. The DSF Beast, I bought it, I really tried to love it a lot, but it just didn't work out for me, and I ended up taking about a $75 bath on that. It's not as bad because I ended up getting a freebie on something, a long story, but still, I took a bath there. The damn top, the Prometheus top, it's a great top, but I'm not a top guy, and I ended up losing like $25 on that. And then, unfortunately, there's the Sin mechanical watch here. I wanted to try a mechanical watch, but I know that there's a gap between what I paid and what I'm going to get back out of it, and that's okay. I'm resigned to that. But you're always going to take baths if you keep in the game long enough. It's just true. It's not you. It's just the nature of the beast. So let me give a couple of pro tips that might be helpful. Because really, it's very easy to suffer in the world of being a gearhead, and so these are some tips that might help you avoid some suffering that have worked for me. First and foremost, if you're going to do a review, or if you're deciding whether to keep something, it's a good idea to sit on it for a little while. So don't review or make a decision until your views have stopped changing. Because, every time you realize, oh, I'm liking this more each day, or I'm liking this a little less, just give it a little bit of time. Sometimes you're going to end up liking it a lot more, like the tie lock, and sometimes you're going to end up liking it a little less. So if you're falling more in love every day, or less in love, just keep going until you hit a steady point, because then you know. Keep that in mind, and also wait till you start seeing the flaws. That's a good way to make sure the honeymoon period is over. When you start seeing issues with things, okay, the honeymoon's over, now I can make my decision. Something to keep in mind. If you're doing reviews particularly, don't review something until you understand it, because I almost really trashed the tie lock. I had I'd written out a whole thing like, okay, yeah, it's a great knife, it's well built and everything, but who the hell is this for? Why? What? And then I didn't, because I just didn't understand it at all. And then it clicked, like, oh, that's what they're going for here. And I realized it's stellar at that. So you gotta really wait until you get it. So moving on. Another thing that really helps to avoid some of the suffering I see in the gearhead world is if you just drop the damn pretense and realize you have a problem. So if you watch my channel, you have a problem. If you've gotten far enough in this video that you're still watching, you've got a problem. I got a problem. We all have freaking problems. This is not a channel, this is a support group. But honestly, you see people on forums saying things like, oh, this is gonna be the very last knife, watch, pen, flashlight I ever buy. This is the pinnacle, the apex. After this, there's nowhere else to go. And you just laugh because you're like, I'm going to see you next week looking for something new. Similarly, this is probably not going to be the one you buy and love and cherish forever and ever and ever and ever. Don't make that promise because you're just going to be here in 2 weeks looking for something new. That's the nature of the addiction. Pardon me. Just drop the freaking pretense and you're going to be a heck of a lot happier for it. I love the Norseman. Would I ever sell the Norseman? Probably not. I'd really rather not. But who knows? I might someday. I'm not going to attach myself to the idea that it's mine forever and ever and ever. Who knows? Anyways, that's a big one. Another big deal is just don't beat yourself up. Because you just don't know until it's in your hands or on your wrist or, you're writing with it. Sometimes you make mistakes. It just happens. You do not know until you know. Basically, and that can be good and bad. I mean, this ETO 452, I thought for sure I would get this, review it, have a good laugh because it's insane, and get rid of it. But lo and behold, I'm not selling this guy. I like it a lot as a mechanical showpiece, and because it's very insane. I never knew that was coming. And on the other side, the Nkosi. I thought, by all intents, this should have been great for me, but my hands didn't fit it, and such is life. And also remember that marketers are trying very, very hard to make you choose in one particular way, and they just don't care what's right for you. They want you to buy their stuff. So, you're being misled. Or at least you're being led by somebody with a conflict of interest. And also remember that making the wrong decision doesn't make you an idiot. If you buy an Nkosi, and maybe I'm just projecting here, but if you buy an Nkosi and you decide, you know what, it doesn't fit my hand, you're not a bad human, you're not an idiot, it just doesn't fit your hand. And so that's why it's really important to be careful in how you go about making these purchases. There's a movie I like called Ronin. It's an action flick, Robert De Niro and whatnot, and they go for a meeting in a little cafe thing, and then afterwards he goes around the back door and picks up a little suspicious package that he'd left there, and somebody says, hey, what's that about? He says, oh, well, you never walk into some place you don't know how to walk out of. And it's all macho, but it's got something, there's truth there. You should always have an exit strategy, particularly in the gear world. You should look into return policies. If you're thinking of buying something retail, buy it from someplace with a good return policy. Or if you don't love it, you're just out shipping. Because that's probably going to be a better deal than anywhere else. Also look at used prices and realize, okay, for the Nkosi, I did this. Okay, I'm going to pay this much retail, and if I turn around and sell it used, I'm probably going to get about $50 less. Know that ahead of time. I thought that was a good bet because I really thought I was going to like the Nkosi. Swing and a miss. Bad bet, but, you lose. You should also think about buying used to minimize your losses. If you're not sure, it helps to buy it at about the same price you'd get back out of it. You end up making a lot more money that way. Or at least losing a lot less. Yeah, that's the ticket. You also want to think about borrowing something or driving someplace or going someplace to check it out. That way you can handle it in the store. Even if you have to drive 3 hours, you're probably going to spend less money driving than you would have lost. And so you're still up ahead. And then, remember that if you can't afford to lose the money, you probably shouldn't be playing the game. So, if your exit strategy is just unattractive, don't go there, flat out. You got to keep that in mind. Another thing that helps when you're doing this is to think about it as rent rather than as a real, as you lost money. So if you buy a watch and you wear it for 2 months and then you sell it for $30 less, you paid $15 a month to rent it. That's a lot more palatable. Or for instance, you buy an expensive custom knife, you carry it for 3 weeks, keeping it in decent shape, and you sell it for $20 less than you paid, or even $10 or something like that, then you rented it for a couple of months. That seems like a good deal. And I've done that on a bunch of occasions, like get something that I think is going to be really neat at a price where I know I'm going to lose a little bit of money, but that's okay. I'm just renting. And I feel better about myself in that way, which is nice. So that's one way to really help and justify things. You also need to come to peace with the fact that you're gonna take a bath sooner or later. It just happens. If you are in the gear world, sooner or later, you're gonna lose some money. You're gonna buy something that you think you love and you don't love. You're gonna buy something high and sell it low. Bubbles burst all the damn time in the knife world. It could be that next week you pay $900 for the mid-tech of the month, and he produces 150 more of them, and suddenly the price just disappears, and so you're never getting back out what you paid. That happens. Hinderer had a huge bubble sometime back. They were selling for like $700, and then 2 weeks later they were selling for $350. Pop, and suddenly you're losing money. It happens. And also, when you look at a forum and you're price checking yourself, it could be the last one that sold at $150. No one is ever going to pay that again. So, you got to keep that in mind. But you got to give yourself permission to get your ass kicked occasionally when you're doing this. It's just the case. It will happen, and you're going to suffer a lot more if you're pretending it's not. Drop the pretense. You have a problem, you're going to take a bath, it's going to be okay. But the most important thing, honestly, is that you have some damn fun with it, because that's why we're doing this. If you're a gearhead, you're doing it because you love checking out the different gear. And it's not about any of that. The money is just a means to the end, and you will screw up, you will find joy, you will find gems, you will find expensive things that you hate. Such is life. Don't beat yourself up. Don't worry too much about it. Don't remove your joy. Just find the joy where you can. So I hope this has been interesting and helpful. If you got any pro tips, go ahead and leave them in the comments. I'm curious, or any truths for that matter, for other people who might come across this. But I hope this has been helpful, and have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of the day.